Hello, dear learners. Welcome to this MOOC on Population and Society. As mentioned in the introductory video, this MOOC is a 4-credit course comprising of 40 modules. And in this video, we shall be discussing the first module, that is Introducing Demography. This module shall give us a brief overview of the subject of demography. We shall be able to learn about the meaning of demography, its different dimensions, its origin, scope, and also about its importance. Demographic processes and demographic phenomenon have been of keen interest to all men since time immemorial. Events such as birth and death were crucial for the existence, survival, and development of human society. Gradually, with the evolution of society, it became important to keep records of human population for administrative purposes and also for formulating policies and programs for human welfare and also to ameliorate socio-economic problems associated with the growth of population. With the passage of time, the importance and significance of demography is further increasing due to the utility of the subject for administrators, policymakers, and scholars studying about population dynamics. Let us now try to understand what is demography. In simple words, dear learners, demography is the systematic study of human population. Different scholars have defined demography in various ways. According to Barclay, the numerical portrayal of human population is known as demography. Hauser and Duncan has stated that demography is the study of size, territorial distribution, and composition of population and changes therein, and the components of such changes which may be identified as natality, mortality, territorial movement, and social mobility. Thus, we can say that in simple words, demography is the scientific and systematic analysis of human population. It is a discipline which deals with the study, with the statistical, scientific study of human population. The word demography has been derived from two Greek words, demos and graphy. Demos means people and graphy means study. Therefore, demography means study of people. Demography primarily draws its subject matter from different other subjects like biology, sociology, economics, and geography. Demography deals with composition, organization, and distribution of population in human society. It is concerned with different aspects of human life like biological, geographical, social, and economic. The study of population or demography is important as it helps us to understand the nature and changes of population over the period of time and why and how these changes takes place. It also helps us to critically analyze the impact of such changes on society. So dear learners, I hope you have understood what is demography. Now we often hear all the term social demography. So let us now try to understand what is social demography and how is it related to demography. We have discussed the meaning of demography, and I repeat that demography is a vast subject encompassing the study of different dimensions of human population. It is a broad area of study which basically is a statistical study of human population and its changing trends and patterns. A demographer is usually concerned with birth rate, death rate, migration, so on and so forth. But a social demography is that branch of study which studies human population and its changes in relation to the larger social context. A social demographer is concerned with the social conditions, the social circumstances and environment that influences birth, death, migration, so on and so forth. Thus, social demography contextualizes the demographic events such as birth, death, issues of population growth, migration in the larger social setting, and argues that demographic processes like birth, death, migration, etc. are influenced by the larger social context. A social demographer, for example, would not analyze population growth in isolation or would not simply do a statistical kind of a survey or a study. A social demographer would understand population growth in its relation to the larger social context. For example, if a social demographer would study the growing population growth or increasing birth rate, it would study it in the context of the status of women in society. For example, in societies where women are treated as childbearing machines or child producing machines, in those societies birth rate would be naturally very high. So social demographers try to understand the demographic events in relation to the larger social context and they argue that these events are actually influenced by the larger social setting. Therefore, in social demography, one does studies that the increasing birth and death rate is not due to scientific growth and development alone, but is also influenced by social and economic conditions as well. And social demographer lays stress on this part of the study. So now, dear learners, you must have understood what is demography and what is social demography. Let us now try to understand or explore the origins of demography and demographic studies. The term demography was first used by a French writer, Gilliard, in 1855. However, many scholars argue that demographic study is actually much older. It began much earlier with the empirical works of John Grant on general demographic trends and processes, mainly mortality. Grant studied the mortality rates based on weekly burial reports of the City of London and was the first one to conduct empirical research using such records to develop a life table. His famous work entitled Natural and Political Observations upon the Bills of Mortality, published in the year 1662, is a landmark attempt in establishing demography as a formal discipline and made him one of the pioneers of demography. Grant is therefore referred to as the father of demography or the founder of demographic studies. Another pioneer of demographic study was Sir William Petty, who conducted extensive empirical studies on mortality and population growth in Britain and Ireland. He too worked with Grant on various aspects of population. Edmund Halley is another eminent scholar who made significant contribution in the development of demography as a modern science. He developed a life table on the basis of his study of the church records of the birth and death rates of the city of Breslau in the late 17th century. The work of these three scholars, namely Grant, Petty and Halley in the 17th century, had laid the theoretical and empirical foundations of demography for its further development in the 18th century and thereafter. Till the end of 17th century, demography was not considered a science, especially in the European countries. Until 1707, when French census enumeration encouraged studies on population, demography was in fact not considered as a distinct field of inquiry. It was only with the interest and the pioneering works of French scholars at the empirical and the theoretical levels that demography could draw the attention of scholars worldwide, and after a few years of the origin of the concept of vital statistics, the term demography was coined for the first time in France. However, the demographic studies in the European countries then were mostly enumerative, statistical, quantitative and descriptive in nature till the end of 19th century. With the passage of time, demographic studies gradually became interdisciplinary in nature, drawing insights from various other disciplines, and it moved from being solely statistical enumerative to a more analytical and multi-science approach with equal emphasis on both quantitative and qualitative demographic analysis. In this context, the contribution of the International Union for Scientific Study of Population, established in 1928, is very, very important. The International Union for Scientific Study of Population, IUSSP, has made immense contribution in making demography a multi-science, broad-based area of research. Owing to the contribution of IUSSP in terms of its research, conferences and publications, demographic studies became interdisciplinary and analytical in dealing with population growth, its causes and consequences, rather than being merely formal and quantitative. The overemphasis on statistical aspects prior to this era, prior to the formation of IUSSP, gave rise to what is referred to as quantitative demography. But there has always been a debate and realizations to make demography a more comprehensive discipline with an interdisciplinary approach to the problem of population. This realization was based on an assumption that the non-demographic factors play an important role in regulating the demographic components. Here, the contribution of IUSSP in broadening the scope of demography is immense. Because of its contributions, there has been a major change in the perspective from a formal, pure demographic approach or a quantitative approach to a more social science approach to the problem of population. The change in perspective is considered the most important development in the history of demographic study. From the late 18th to the 19th century, a long period was marked by such shifting interest in almost every country. Now, coming to America, the demographic studies conducted in America were much more broader. The scholars in America, they tried to correlate demographic components with that of the socio-cultural, economic and the political factors. The scholars from different areas, from different disciplines dealing with the problem of population, tried to understand the population problem from their own disciplinary perspective. Thus, demography became a confluence of various streams of scholarship. The scholars in America have taken, therefore, a leading role in modifying and integrating the diverse views and interests in demographic studies, which pushed demography to the status of a modern multi-science discipline. Dear learners, over the period one observes a transition in the nature of demographic studies. From pure statistical study, it has over the time become interpretative and multidisciplinary. The result of this kind of a transition is the development of the sociological study or the sociological approach to the study of population. And this approach is what we call as social demography, and it is an emerging field of study in sociology today. The sociological approach to the problem of population drew the attention of scholars or sociologists like Max Weber, who tried to understand the population problem in its relation to the social context. The scholars from sociology and other diverse fields are, they have brought in different disciplinary perspectives to analyze the population problem, thereby, making demography largely multidisciplinary in nature. This change in the focus from pure formal statistical approach of demography and demographic analysis to a multi-science approach gradually spread across the globe, and such kind of an approach even emerged in the developing countries. In the developing countries, we all know that demography is a late arrival. It grew only along with the census enumerations. In India, the first systematic attempt to carry out population census in some part of the country was done during the British rule in between 1865 and 1872. But the first All India census began only in 1881. The Indian census, along with other sources, provided the database for the emerging discipline of demography in India. The alarming population growth in India demanded a more broad-based study of the population problem, a more broad-based analysis of fertility, mortality, migration, so on and so forth. And in order to discuss the population problem in a broader perspective, the first conference on population was organized in February 1936 in Lucknow. This was the beginning of the presentation of studies from the broader and diverse viewpoints, namely demographic, economic, and sociological. From the beginning of the last century, there has again been a growing concern regarding high fertility and mortality, particularly infant and maternal mortality in India. This concern has given rise to the establishment of a very, very prominent professional body at the national level known as the Indian Association for the Study of Population in the year 1971. Thus, to conclude, over the years there has been a transition of perspective in demography. We have already learned about it. In the broader sense, the concept of demography encompasses both formal and demographic analysis, and on the other hand, it encompasses the population studies. It is today an interdisciplinary subject with a multidisciplinary methodology. For example, mortality, a demographic component, today is no longer studied in isolation, but is understood as being determined by a number of factors and is therefore analyzed from different diverse frames of reference. Hence, this kind of demographic components will not only have demographic explanation but also biological, genetic, psychological, geographical, economic, and sociological interpretations. Contemporary demographers mainly focus on two aspects of population study. First, the size, composition, characteristics of population change, and secondly, the processes that influence population change. So, dear learners, you must have understood by now what is demography, what is social demography, and how we have witnessed a change or a transition of perspective in demography from being statistical and enumerative to more social, multidisciplinary and analytical in nature. Let us now try to understand the scope of demography. Demography, as we all have understood by now, is a broad area of study. It studies about the size and the shape of population. It studies different aspects related to birth rate, death rate, It studies about population composition and density. It studies about the socio-economic problems of population growth. It studies about how excessive population growth can create different kinds of socio-economic problems. It studies about distribution of population, that is why in some societies the density of population is more, why it is less in some societies. It also studies about migration, urbanization, and how these factors, how these processes like migration and urbanization are creating population changes. Then the scope of demography also covers the different theoretical perspectives on population studies, the different theories forwarded by sociologists, economists, demographers, biologists, so on and so forth. Then the different practical aspects involved with the study of population also comes within the scope of population. This includes the practical models related to various methods of measuring population changes like census, population projection, age gender pyramid, etc. Population policy of the government is also taken into consideration while studying demography. Therefore, population policies also come within the scope of demographic study. The population policies can be of different types like family planning, reproductive health policies, maternal health policies, so on and so forth, and students of demography studies about these policies and its larger implication for the society as a whole. So from this we can say that the scope of demography is very vast, from the different demographic processes to its relation to the larger societal context comes within the ambit of a demographic study. Let us now try to understand whether demography is a science. Why is demography called a science? Before that, we have to know what is a science. A science is a systematic body of knowledge ascertainable by observation and experimentation. It is a body of generalization, principles, theories, or laws which traces out a causal relationship between the cause and the effect. The main characteristics of science are what? That science is objective in nature, it is verifiable, it is based on theories and principles. It can be tested by observation and experiments. It has predictive ability. It has universal applicability, so on and so forth. Now, based on these characteristics, we can understand whether demography is a science or not. Demography possesses almost all of these characteristics which are considered as science. For example, demography deals with facts and figures of population. Demography includes data which is collected through census, and the census data is verifiable and accurate and is directly collected from targeted population. Demography has its own theories which we are going to discuss in the coming modules. These theories are scientifically tested on the basis of observations and experiments. Demography predicts the changes in population on the basis of cause and effect relationship. The principles of demography are applicable to a large extent to all the countries and regions. Therefore, we can conclude that demography is a science. And according to Irene Tauber, with the improved data, the new techniques and precise measurement of demographic transition that is occurring, demography has become a science. In fact, it has become an applied science and applied technology. So, dear learners, we have now understood that demography is a science because it has adapted the scientific principles and methodologies in its studies, and therefore it is a scientific study of human population. Now, coming to the importance of demography. What is the importance of demographic studies? With the tremendous rise of population, especially in developing countries, it has become very important to study about population and its consequences for the larger economy. Demographic study has therefore become very important because it helps the policymakers to formulate policies and programs for welfare of population, for development of human population, for measuring or for checking population growth, to ameliorate the problems associated with population growth, so on and so forth. Therefore, demographic study is very important. It is important for understanding whether the economy of a particular region is growing in proportion to its population growth rate or not. If not, there have to be some policy changes so that, rising population do not create much issues of unemployment, housing, shelter, so on and so forth. Demographic study is also very important for the larger society because increasing population hampers growth and development of a society by creating shortage of basic facilities like water, sanitation, electricity, education, health, transport, communication, so on and so forth. These issues are pointed out by population studies, which are helpful for the government to take necessary steps required for mitigating social problems. Demographic study is also important because it provides inputs to policymakers and planners for the economic planning of the country. Formulation of policies for birth control, future fertility rate, availability of labor forces, etc. are based upon population data. Therefore, population enumeration and demographic analysis is very, very important. Demographic studies or studies on population also helps administrators in taking decisions relating to the functioning of the government. Demographic studies are therefore very, very important for them. Demographic studies are also very important for the polity. Census studies gives data relating to the number of females, male voters, their educational qualifications, age group, occupation, annual income, composition of family, so on and so forth, with help of which the political parties can frame their agenda during the time of elections. Some other decisions like the appointment of election officers and staffs, establishment of election booths, etc. are also based on this information. So it is very, very important to conduct study on population. It is very, very important to have concrete population data for research, for administrators, for policy making. This data becomes very important. Therefore, demographic study is important for the larger social context, for the economy, for the polity, for the larger social context. Therefore, demography is a very, very important subject. So, dear learners, we have come to the end of today's module. In this module, we have tried to understand what is demography, what is social demography, how did demography originate as a discipline, who are the pioneers, what is the subject matter of demography, whether demography is a science, and what is the importance of demography as a subject. We hope you have understood what has been discussed in this module. We will also be providing you with the e-text where there is detailed elaboration of what has been discussed in this video. We hope you will be able to grasp them and enjoy reading and listening to this video. With this, I thank you once again for listening to our video. We'll see you in the next video. Till then, take care and bye.